The Swamp Thing, issue 6, Ram V writing with Mike Perkins on the art. And
How are we over halfway through this book already?
that is kind of weird, yes. Technically, if it only has 10 issues, we're over halfway through. And as I expected, this whole Suicide Squad crossover is not. I mean, I'm sure there's been some Swamp Thing related things mentioned in Suicide Squad, but you don't need to read Suicide Squad. All of the relevant things are in this. It's fine.
I will say it does probably make this the weakest issue of the book so far, because there are, multiple points where we're focusing on the Suicide Squad side of things, and
Yeah,
those are less interesting.
to a point. I kind of dig it though. Is this weird demented version of Predator where the Suicide Squad are going through the jungle looking for Swamp Thing?
I get it, but I got to the end of this issue and I was like, oh, this isn't over. Like, I felt like I didn't get my full dose of Swamp Thing because I was like, half the issue was reading Suicide Squad stuff, and again, it's not really terrible. Like, it's still good. Like, still really good. But I felt like it was the weakest issue by a reasonable margin for me.
I mean, maybe that's true. I don't know if I would jump onto that as quickly though. I think this issue does a lot of really smart things. Obviously, Mike Perkins is back, so the art is gorgeous. All the forest stuff is, the jungle rather, is really really nice.
There's a forest.
And what I dig about this is that Levi effectively. So what they've done is they've actually dropped a lot of toxins onto the forest before they've came down. The idea being that it'll weaken Swamp Thing in the forest around them. So Levi's narration as he's sort of been reformed, and this is in India. This is back kind of in the same forest that he was in with his brother, and as we see in this issue, because he remembers what Alec Holland said to him is that the green at its core is basically this memory of everything that's ever happened. So he kind of reaches out to the memory of the green, and it's also his own memories, which is kind of interesting. I like the idea that he's kind of fusing his own personal memory with seeing the exact truth of what the memory is, because the green doesn't fade, because human memories over time they kind of they fade a little bit. You remember the important parts, you don't remember every detail. It becomes a bit more obscured over time. It's just natural. I like the idea that the green has this perfect memory though, so he kind of taps in so he can experience these moments again in his life. So he remembers being on this trip and seeing his brother again, and we're up in this forest and looking at. We used to come up here and swing on this tree, and we used to look out at the city, and we couldn't tell whether the lights of the city ended and when the stars began, and all these things. Really solid stuff, and it's for me the way where this went, because then the second flashback that he looks at is when he actually sees his father again back at the house, because his father's still alive here, of course, and his father's asking him questions about what he does, and it seems like he's here to obviously do this deal for his company, which sounds, the implication I got is that it at least in part will take away some of the forest. This land deal, whatever it may be, it will involve taking away some of the forest, because he's talking about, this place is special, it shouldn't be touched, it's billions of years old, all that stuff. But this idea of the importance of this place as an ecological entity, the importance of this place. Talk about how the mud's important. We all come from the mud, and Swamp Thing in this issue literally reforms out of the mud, right? But this idea that this issue is also tapping into personally what this place means to Levi that he seems to have forgotten. When he's hearing this flashback, he's sort of just shrugging it off and going, this is a big deal for the people here. It'll be a big, boon to the economy. It'll be a big boon to the industry.
But we see the flashbacks of, his own memories of this place, and it obviously, was important to him.
Yeah. So it's kind of mixing the real history of this place, and it's not that his history is not as real as any of the rest of it, but the idea of this personal attachment to it, and hey, you've got memories here too that it's important, that shouldn't be tarnished. That And then I think as I was realizing that as I was reading it, the idea that the Suicide Squad or Amanda Waller okayed just dropping a bunch of toxins to try and make it weak, annoyed me on on a level. I was like, oh, you bastards.
It's very Amanda Waller, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah, obviously it's a little bit topical, and environmentalism, of course, is sneaking in here, and I don't mean that in a bad way. But not only was I getting Predator vibes from the idea of them hunting, that this team of badasses hunting them through the forest, but also at one point when the Heatwave finds them and tries to burn them, he jumps off a waterfall, and that literally happens in Predator. Arnold jumps off a waterfall when he's running from the Predator.
Mm.
So unsurprisingly, the most interesting member of the Suicide Squad here might be Parasite, because he sort of wanders off and starts doing his whole thing. Maybe it's just because the art from Perkins just lends itself really well to more monstrous characters, but there's kind of a tease of like, what's Parasite actually doing? What's he feeding off of in the forest?
Yeah, he's got something that's, something's drawn his attention. And, so we see him feeding on it, but it's like, what is it? Is it, some sort of, irradiated thing out in the forest? But
Yeah.
he seems to be aware of the green. He's feeding on the green energy, perhaps.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see what they do, because if anything, Parasite's the one that will give Swamp Thing a mano fight next issue, right? Because he's the one that can theoretically be that big and strong and all the rest of it. Because the second flashback, of course, comes when he's in the water after jumping off the waterfall, and it's the water kind of reminds him of the rain of that day and talking to his father.
Oh, the page in this though, where it's about his childhood and stuff in the forest. The art on that page is just sublime. The sequencing and the way it goes through, it might be the best page in the book, just from an art perspective. Even though there might be individual moments that are like more to taste. I think this is the most impressive piece overall, as like a tapestry on this page that he weaves through.
I think something I like about the page before that, when he's talking to his father, is his dad's drinking tea or coffee, and
it's India, it's tea.
Sure. The point being is that there's a moment where there's like a shot of the teacup, right, and the rains get into the water, and I thought it was just like a nice little subtle visual of the idea of like everything being part of the same system, and the idea that he doesn't seem to care that rains went into.
Just picks it up and drinks it anyway.
Yeah, he doesn't care because it's all part of the flow of life, as it were. It's just more water, so who cares? I don't know. I thought it was a nice little touch. Given the idea that Swamp Thing at its core is always about how the green's life, everything's connected, it all's recycled, all that, the life cycle of things. It's always been a part of the DNA of Swamp Thing.
Definitely, yeah.
So, but sure enough, he gets up in the water and mutates. They're all kind of converging on this river where he is. Heatwave's waiting for him. But the final page, of course, is Swamp Thing, full monster size, coming out of the water behind Heatwave.
I appreciate all the panels of him just down on the water before in a very human body.
Yeah.
Which is like, I think it's the first time we've seen him as a human in this issue, not in the flashbacks.
He's kind of got a human face at the start, and when he's like in the vines, like sort of forming out of it, but only partially. It's kind of like a bit of a mix.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely laying like unconscious as a full human body first, and then the vines grow around him, and he just becomes the Swamp Thing. It's a really nice transition.
Yeah, that panel at the bottom of that page where he sort of turned, almost looking right at us with the red eyes, when he's still mostly human. He's got a few vines around him, but he's mostly still human. So it looks quite intimidating. It's almost a Michael Myers sit up and turning and looking at the victim.
It's really creepy. I really like it.
It's a nice build to that final page.
Yeah.
So
he looks full Swamp Thing.
Oh yeah, he's full. If anything, he's more than full because he's got all these extra branches coming out because he's ready for a fight.
Yeah.
So really, really neat. Obviously, the Suicide Squad are going to not be aware of what they bargained for. Yeah, I dug this show a lot. I didn't necessarily feel like. I mean, obviously the Suicide Squad are there, but I think the stuff of them trying to figure out where he is and looking for him, and them disrespecting the forest. Heatwave's quite happy to just start burning shit down.
I'm shocked.
Left and right.
I don't want to sound too negative because I still think this is a really good issue. Probably a great issue still. And the Suicide Squad stuff, like I say, it's not bad. It's entertaining in its own way doing this stuff. But it's not been, for me, this wasn't the same level of, philosophical Swamp Thing existential crises that every other issue of this book has been.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with it being a little less extreme on that side. But I thought it was really well told. I thought it was gorgeous. It still kind of alluded to a lot of the themes that it's playing with the character and him kind of like... Because again, the character's whole story is that he left where he's from. He left his family. And the idea of him, forgive the word here, but, reconnecting with his roots is a big theme of his story and his character's journey. So this was literally in the forest where his roots were planted.
You're making it really hard for me to forgive you.
What are you giving Swamp Thing issue 6?
I think I'll give it an 8, just about. But it's a soft 8, I think.
Soft 8, okay. I'll give it a rock hard 8.5.